And 3, and a 2, and a 1. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being here. I am Kasey, and here we talk about the stories we got into last week. Mostly movies and TV, but everything is welcome, really. There are probably going to be some critiques in there, but this is supposed to be a place to talk about the things we enjoy without being a dick, so I hope everything comes off as fair and earnest. At the end of the day, I'm just reflecting on all the work that the creators put into the projects that we're talking about. At the end of the day, this is a show about spreading love for the things we love, and hopefully people find something of interest in what I'm talking about and explore it for themselves. This Friday we have a Dragon Ball video coming out that we put a lot of effort into, so if that is your jam, then please check that out. But that is all I have in the way of updates and introducing things, so here we are with the last week of August of 2024. Friday the 13th from 2009. It took 12 movies for the franchise to get a proper reboot in 2009, where instead of a straightforward remake, here the filmmakers would opt to combine the first 4 movies to craft something they hope would equal to something greater than the sum of its parts. You get the prologue, heavily taking from the original, Baghead Jason comes from part 2, and Friends at a Cabin setting gives me heavy flashbacks from part 3 in the final chapter, plus the dude looking around for his lost sister subplot from the final chapter, all with the shiniest coat of polish that Anchor Bay could find. This is the only Friday the 13th movie that I've been able to see in theaters, and I was the prime demographic when I was 16 and it was released in 2009. It is an excellent distillation of the story and the general catharsis of the franchise as a whole. One of my favorites, but it definitely lost the low-budget vibe that is so ingrained in the franchise that helped enhance the mood and made the script quality a lot more forgivable. Marvel One-Shot, The Consultant. Marvel legend Agent Coulson is having a conversation with another agent that leads to the post-credit scene in The Incredible Hulk. I mean, this mostly feels like it was meant to be part of a post-credit scene but was cut for time, and I don't mind that at all. It's short, quick, witty, and fun. 2011's Captain America, The First Avenger. I know we are getting a little mini-series about Captain America returning the Infinity Stones. I would have rather us have gotten a little Howling Commando mini-series that takes place during the montage of The First Avenger instead. Speed-running the first few years of his story to create a self-contained origin story, we follow an itty-bitty guy with a huge heart, Steve Rogers, during the Second World War, be selected for a medical enhancement we get one shot at. Luckily for us it works, and now we have an hour left of Nazi punching catharsis. For a long time, I was let down by this movie and I couldn't figure out why. This was my first watch where I felt like I really got into the picture. You can easily make a Saving Private Ryan plus Captain America. It would have been probably amazing, but it would have lost a lot of the earnestness that comes by rounding off the edges of a movie like this. I still never have been a big fan of Chris Evans' deep voice coming out of Itty Bitty Steve, but that is also a dumb complaint that I completely forget about as soon as he gets his roids. Also, I think David Bradley's 2 minutes in the opening scene might be the largest waste of an actor in all of the MCU. 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah. You know, if there is any Showa-era monster that I think is still relevant and should be resurrected, it's Hedorah. Like, just imagine Hedorah rising out of Lake Erie in the Monsterverse. Right from the get-go, kaiju are rising out of the depths, birthed from pollution itself. The collective organism we know as Hedorah is here to wreck shop while the scientists do science and figure out how to stop the monster, and Godzilla is pretty much just here to help. I don't know if there is a Godzilla movie with such deep valleys between the high highs and the low lows and the weird weirds. I love so much about what this movie does, the messaging, the tone, the balancing of human characters and the kaiju action. It's all done really well and I think in an interesting capacity, but at most instances the physical manifestation of what came to screen is really weird and awkward. The more I understand and watch this Godzilla entry, the more I deeply appreciate Banno and all the work he has done for the Godzilla franchise. Whether you like this movie or not, there has not been a more devout champion for the King of the Monsters, and we most certainly would not have gotten Godzilla as we know it today without Yoshimitsu Banno. 1973's Doctor Who, The Three Doctors. Jumping 2 Doctors into the future, and who knows how long into the first Doctor's past, the Time Lords are having some issues, while simultaneously camera effects and popcorn ball monsters are hunting down the 3rd Doctor on the unit base. The only thing the Time Lords can figure out or manage to do is pluck the 2nd Doctor out of time and space to help, and then have the 1st Doctor video call in every other commercial break to keep everyone else in line. The villain of the 10th anniversary special is the ancient Time Lord Omega, and while I don't love this original design with the giant helmet, the character and Stephen Thorne's delivery are pretty magnificent. I wish it did not take 2 episodes to get to his introduction, but the bickerings between the second and the third Doctors is more than entertaining enough to keep things moving. I'm also grateful the studio found a way to incorporate William Hartnell around his health complications. His role is small, but his presence is felt when he's on screen. The episode is a little slow to get going and feels a little more like the 2.5 Doctors, but it's equally fun and witty, and it is also very important moving the third Doctor's story forward. 2010's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Our protags in A Nightmare on Elm Street are a band of high school teens living their high school lives when they start getting got by an explicitly coded creep in their dreams. Instead of the compilation approach of other slasher reimaginings, here we get the most straightforward remake one could imagine, but given a much heavier tone check to keep things dour and a plethora of reworked visual effects. The few things the movie end up changing I always found worked really well. That opening kill is great, as is the final sequence. Not involving the police also adds some mystery that I equally appreciate and wish we just didn't get an answer to at all. Everything this production does to ground the tone and make it feel scarier, I always felt stripped the juxtaposition that helped make Freddy Krueger so effective in the original 5 movies. Every actor I think is knocking it out of the park, playing an extremely tired kid who's been up for days straight, but equally that leads to some distinctly uninteresting and tired performances. I think the Nightmare on Elm Street remake is technically well made and is probably effectively scary for a lot of people, and I'd love to hear from them. I, at just about every instance, see what the movie is going for, but it just makes me feel as tired as the characters. Never Sleep Again, the making of A Nightmare on Elm Street from 2006. 4 hours of cast interviews and behind-the-scenes information for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, up through Freddy vs. Jason. The 2009 remake was still 3 years out at this point, okay? Narrated by Nancy Thompson herself, Heather Langenkamp, with a series of really well stop-motion animated bumpers starring a puppet Freddy reminiscent of Part 3. The documentary equally covers the history of New Line Cinema's production, as the documentary itself refers to the studio as the house that Freddy built. Producer Bob Shea gets equal if not more screen time than the franchise creator Wes Craven, and I don't entirely mind it as he was sincerely invested in the franchise both creatively and financially. This is one of the best franchise documentaries that comes to memory, especially before the rise of creator VC. I would recommend this if you were just a fan of stop-motion animation for the bumpers. They are so well done. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937. Okay, so I finally understand Grumpy's popularity. It's that magic ass of his, isn't it? Like, man tweaks so well he can play the organ with that thing. The title character in Snow White is forced on the run when her stepmother, the Queen, gets a little too jealous and orders the 14-year-old to be moitered. After Miss White bribes a few new friends with housework and she escapes the Queen decides to ugly herself up and kill her daughter herself. This has never been a personal favorite Disney movie here. I don't have any real attachment from watching this when I was younger. I very much appreciate every single achievement this picture accomplished as far as animation goes. It is visually exceptionally well crafted and composed. I've just never been able to latch onto a single character archetype put forth in this story, and if I want to just be blown away visually, I'll put on Fantasia. Doctor Who, The 5 Doctors from 1983. Jumping ahead an additional 2 Doctors in the timeline, which means we're now on the 5th. And I won't even guess when we are in the first Doctor's timeline. The first, second, third, and 5th Doctors are plucked out of their collective time streams, since the 4th is stuck loading since Tom Baker refused to return. The Time Lords in their infinite wisdom sent the Master, you know, the one Time Lord who has a hate boner for the Doctor above anyone else, to save the day. Well, the Doctors independently fuck him over so hard that the 5th escapes their little predicament and the 3rd steals his credentials, which gives 5 a minute to figure things out from the outside while the other 3 incarnations terrorize the Master. Of course, we wish William Hartnell could live and act forever, but his recasting with Richard Hurndahl works surprisingly well. Hurndahl does well to emulate Hartnell while adding a touch of softness to his take on the Time Lord. His pairing with Susan also works beautifully if Susan wasn't written to be the same teenager she was when the series first began in her actions. The special as a whole also works surprisingly well around the restraints it was met with. Between a Doctor refusing to return at all and another having joined the Nether Sphere, the narrative presented makes as much sense as any Doctor Who story, and the character writing, especially that of the Doctors, is superb. Probably some of the best character writing in the entire run of the classic series. 2017's Never Hike Alone, a Friday the 13th fan film. In this fan film, we follow a hiker and a blogger that stumbles into Camp Crystal Lake and into the arms of everyone's favorite hockey mask killer. Let chase ensue. That's it. Stretched over the course of less than an hour, the creators wanted to make a bare bones and thrilling zombie Jason story, and they succeeded. If you plucked this off of YouTube and inserted it into any Friday the 13th movie, the only thing that would stand out is how much better looking this is over whichever movie you put it in. All of Vincent DeSantis' films that I have seen have been just as well made, if not more technically polished than the major releases he is emulating. I cannot recommend Never Hike Alone enough to both Friday the 13th fans and fans of classic slashers in general. 2020's Never Hike in the Snow. An amazing follow-up to Never Hike Alone that does very, very simple things to make sense within the franchise and stand out. Taking place during the winter, and bringing back Tommy Jarvis in a significant fashion. We bring back a few more familiar faces and a stream of continuity never seen in the Friday 13th franchise proper. The kills are equally simple, memorable, and effective thanks to the snowy backdrop, but the sound design anchors the whole production and gives the thing a vaguely unsettling vibe. Expanding Tom Matthews' role also works brilliantly. He falls back into the role perfectly and is brought in a way that you don't have to be explicitly familiar with parts 4, 5, or 6, but definitely should be. Never Hike Alone 2 from 2023. So if you cut the 3 Never Hike Alone fan films into a feature-length movie, it would probably be my favorite Friday the 13th of them all. We start out by telling a lead-up story to Never Hike Alone, but things eventually lead to a continuation of the events we saw there. Jason chasing Jarvis in an ambulance to the hospital to wreak havoc before everyone doubles back to Crystal Lake for relevance. Where the first 2 productions were the equivalent to 2 or 3 amazingly produced stalking and chasing scenes, here the scope is expanded in a way that brings everything together instead of furthering isolated at smaller sister films. It provides a very satisfying conclusion to Tommy Jarvis' story while letting the character have fun and bounce off the rest of the well-performed cast. 2011's A Lonely Place to Die. A handful of friends go on a deep nature hike. It's beautiful, serene, and we bumped into human traffickers. Great. After our heroes save a girl they find buried in the woods, it becomes the expected but well-done take on the most dangerous game. This time with better stakes in a situation other than a rich dude on a hunting island. I thought the third act of this movie escalates a little quicker than I would like, but even that was pulled off great. Everything that came before that, though, we set well-performed and well-written characters in a tense and believable situation that combines the tension of survival horror with good old-fashioned awful people being awful to other people who don't deserve it by any means. I wish people would talk about A Lonely Place to Die more. So, yeah, that's everything we really watched last week. Rings of Power Season 2 just started, but I won't get into that until it's over, but I'm very much enjoying it thus far. Otherwise, thank you for sticking with me through this whole video. I hope everyone got to watch something special and fun last week in their own right. I'd love to know about whatever that was for you. Again, Dragon Ball video this Friday, then back to normal videos on Monday. Other than that, thank you for being you. I genuinely want your day to go well.